Shalom, more praise to Yahweh Shemel Shah, double honor to the Apostle GMS. I'm no other connection in the video, and this is part 4 about Joseph and about the show about Joseph and why he was able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. And I'm giving you some history on dreams, and this is from a book called Dreams and Astral Travel. This is from a chapter called A Gift from the Gods. I'm gonna start from right here, page 15. I'm gonna read to verse 17. I'm gonna stop. Because at the end of the last show, talking about how these different priests, these lector priests as they was called, also known as masters of the house of life, or masters of the double house, or masters of secret things, or the magic house of life, and things of that nature. This is what these particular people who interpreted dreams were known as. These dream interpreters were known as in ancient Egypt. So it says around 1400 BCE, makes it a little bigger. Around 1400 BCE, about 3,400 years ago, a young Egyptian prince named Thutmose goes hunting one day in the hot desert on the Giza Plateau. Thutmose is the son of the pharaoh Amenhotep II, and his name means born of the god Thoth. He admires 3 majestic and mysterious pyramids that tower over the sand and a more mysterious sphinx nearby. The role of the pharaoh is in the 18th. The role of the pharaoh is in 18 is in its the rule of the pharaoh is in its 18th dynasty, but these structures are older still. Their origin lost to time. Neither the prince nor any of his royal advisors know who built these massive structures or why. The full form of the Sphinx is unknown, for only its massive head juts out of the sand. It has been in the desert for a very long time. It says the prince harbors great ambition to rule Egypt. He is not the firstborn son of the pharaoh, however, which means his older brother will inherit the throne when his father dies. Thutmose rests in the shadow of the Sphinx's head. You know what? I'm gonna jump down. I'm gonna keep reading. It says, Thutmose rests in the shadow of the Sphinx's head, falls asleep and dreams. In his dream, the sun god who was embodied by the Sphinx named Kefri-Ra'atum comes to him and complains that his body is covered by sand. The god tells Thutmose that if he will clear away the sand so that the limbs and the health of the Sphinx can be restored, it will be rewarded with the kingship of Egypt. When the prince awakens, he is excited. He does as the dream instructs. In 1419 BCE, after casting his older brother out of power, he becomes pharaoh, the 8th ruler of the 18th dynasty. He becomes Thutmose IV and makes the throne name Men-Keperu-Re, meaning everlasting are the manifestations of Re. In gratitude of the dream, Thutmose IV records the story of his dream in hieroglyphics on a stele and carves a slab of limestone and plants it between the uncovered lion paws of the Sphinx. That was known as the dream stele, or the dream stela. Dreamstele. 2 words. I'm not going to go into that. I was thinking about it, but I'm not going to go into that. Some historians, despite this story, arguing that Thutmose grabbed power and then made up a dream to justify his actions. No one could fault him if the gods had directed him to a certain course of action. So historians are saying that Thutmose grabbed power, but he made up a dream justify his actions. In other words, he said, I had this dream that this happened to justify taking the seat of power. Okay? Basically saying that gods gave him divine guidance, or in other words, a divine command to be able to do that. Because if they can get the so-called gods to justify him, then how could he be wrong? No one could fault him if the gods had directed him to a certain course of action. Either way, the stela, which still exists today, is a testimony to the power of dreams in changing the course of history. Dreaming may seem an ordinary part of life today, but in ancient times, dreams were considered gifts of the gods. They revealed the future, were important in healing, and were used magically to influence the thoughts and actions of others. People did not have dreams. They were given or sent dreams. I know I'm reading kind of fast, but I hope you brothers could read along. Good dreams were sent by gods, and bad dreams, which were believed to cause illness, were sent by demons. The Western tradition of beliefs about dreams and their meanings dates to the Sumerians, Assyrians, Babylonians, and Egyptians. Professional dream interpreters studied dreams for information of state and political importance, and for solutions in community disputes and problems. People practice dream incubation. That is the practice of instructing dreams to answer specific questions or to become avenues of healing. The oldest dream book in existence comes from Assyria. The Assyrian dream book is actually a collection of clay cylinders. They were found at Nineveh in the library of the famous Assyrian king Ashur-bani-pal, who ruled from 669 to 626 BC, so that's 43 years. The cylinders show that Assyrian dream interpretation relied heavily upon contraries or opposites. For example, to dream of being blessed by God actually meant one would be punished by God. Dreams in Egypt. The Egyptians absorbed some of the Assyrian and Mesopotamian dream practices into their own culture. They considered dreams to be a revelation of truth. If a person was given instructions in a dream, he had to follow them or else he would suffer misfortune. If dreams were not interpreted properly, the gods would be angry. In Egypt, the guardians of dream interpretation were called lector priests or masters of the secret things and scribes of the double house of life. So scribes of the double house. I mentioned masters of the double house. I believe I read it said masters on another site. But masters of secret things, scribes of the double house. That's what they were known as. The priests were learned men who kept the sacred books containing the religious lore and laws and magical rites. They worked in libraries that were part of many temples throughout the land. People consulted them for dream interpretation and spells to solve problems. The temple books of dreams and magic were carefully guarded in order to protect the status of the priests. The lector priests were forerunners of today's psychotherapists. They consulted with people about the meanings of their dreams and offered other advice. In interpreting dreams, the Egyptians also relied heavily upon contraries or meanings that were opposite of the contents of the dream. They also relied upon puns and play on words, which are techniques that still work today. Dreams were an important part of magical practices. The lector priests had many spells and rituals for sending messages into the dreaming sleep of another person to try to influence their thinking and actions. Even the dead considered dreams for the living. The dead played an important role in Egyptian dream magic. Since the dead lived in another realm, they were believed to have great power, which could be controlled through magic. This is why the Most High didn't want us to deal with necromancy. It tells you that in the scriptures. Consulting with the dead. The dead were summoned to enforce curses and spells via dreams, and also to appear in dreams in order to answer questions about the future. And then when Saul went to the witch at Endor to rise up Samuel, people who had drowned in the Nile were especially believed to have a divine gift of prophecy and were commanded to come to the dreams of a priest or magician. So you see, it said they were known as scribes of the double house. But what does it mean, double house? What does that mean? Or double house of life, or house of life? What does that mean? And real quick, see this right here? It says figure 1.1. This life-size statue of a chief lector priest was discovered by archaeologists in 1860. In ancient Egypt, lector priests watched over the sacred texts in dream temples, interpreted people's dreams, and cast spells to solve problems. I could read on, but that's the point. Now, what does it mean by double house or house of life? Now, this right here says PR or per. It's a hieroglyph. That means house. What you see right there? This right here means house. It looks like a floor plan. Let me give you an example of a blueprint. Well, first let me read it. It says per. It says Gardner Sign listed 01, which a Gardner Signs list is a list of common Egyptian hieroglyphs compiled by Sir Alan Gardner. It is considered a standard reference in the study of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. And when did he live? March 29th, 1879 to December 1963. So let's go back. So it says per. I believe that's how you say it in English. Sometimes it says PR. It says per is the hieroglyph for house, the floor plan of a walled building with an open doorway. So it's a floor plan of a walled building with an open doorway. Let me give you an example of a blueprint. This is just from roomsketcher.com. It says Nordic home. See? This is what a walled building. See the walls here where these blues at? These are walls. And what do you see? An open doorway. See that right here? And if you know how to read blueprints, this right here is a door. The door is opening this way. Let me show you something. The door is opening right here. It's swinging open like this. Okay? So this will be a door closed and this will be a door opening. So it's a floor plan, and this is where the door is going to look, how it's going to look if it's closed. Okay? So this door is swinging open from this direction. This little line is the door, and it's swinging open from here. Okay? So this is a walled building, and you see open doorways all over. It even says first floor on the bottom right side. Go back. So it says, while its original pronunciation is not known with certainty, modern Egyptology assigns it the value of per. So they just say per, but purely on the basis of convention specific to the discipline. Convention specific to the discipline. In other words, convention specific to the discipline of the Egyptological pronunciation. Because even right here it says, as a convention, it's under Egyptological pronunciation. It says, as a convention, Egyptologists make use of an Egyptological pronunciation in English. That's why it says it's pronounced per, P-E-R. See that right there? P-E-R. It says, however, the ancient Greek, jump down, go right to the point. House of Life Library. Per, combined with an associate personal name, God, or location becomes house of. So if you take per, which is this Egyptian hieroglyph of floor plan right here, if you take per, that means house. But when you combine it with a name or location, it now means house of. So it says, an example, for Pharaoh Senakte, Senakte, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is the city of Python per. So if I were to say something like house right here, right, and then write the Egyptian hieroglyphic sign for Thoth, the god Thoth, it would be house of Thoth, because when you combine it with the personal name or location, it now means house of. So you take the Egyptian sign, the Egyptian hieroglyph for house, and you combine it with another hieroglyph, it now means house of, and whatever the other hieroglyph means. So it says per and ankh, life, is a combination hieroglyph, and is the word for a house of life. See that? So this right here means house of life. See, it has double houses or two houses. See a house, then you see an ankh, see another house. That means house of life. So I would perceive they would call it double house of life, because the ankh represents life and the floor plan represents a house. But since it has two houses on it, or double, I will perceive that that's why they would call it a double house, and the ankh meaning life. And when you read on, what does it say? Per and ankh, life, is a combination hieroglyph and is the word for a house of life. The house of life is a library for papyrus, books, or scrolls, as well as a possible scriptorium, meaning where you will write. Scriptorium, literally a place for writing, is commonly used to refer to a room in medieval European monasteries devoted to the writing, copying, and illuminating of manuscripts commonly handled by monastic tribes. So we understand that this right here means house of life. Okay? There's more I can read on that, but that's basically the point on that. Alright? Remember, it says the house of life is a library or papyrus, books, scrolls, as well as a possible scriptorium, right? When you go back to the beginning of the second paragraph, what does it say? In Egypt, the guardians of dream interpretation were called lector priests, or masters of secret things, and scribes of the double house of life. The priests were learned men who kept the sacred books containing the religious lore and laws and magical rites. They worked in libraries, or what? The house of life, that were part of many temples throughout the land. So there you go. And even says right here, it says what? Even tells you about Israelites in dreams too. But that's a whole nother topic. We're not even dealing with that. It says this life-size statue of a lector priest was discovered by archaeologists in 1860 in ancient Egypt. Lector priests watched over the sacred texts in dream temples, interpreted people's dreams, and cast spells to solve problems. So there you go. Let's continue on. See right here? Per ankh. Per would be that house with the opening, like a floor plan with an opening doorway, and the ankh meaning life. Per ankh, the Egyptian house of life. Now we were on this site in the last part, but I want to go back to this real quick. Alright, we read the whole thing. See the bottom of the screen, lector priest, we read this whole thing. But right here it says, but what about the Hartumim? That's look like a Cha, Ra, Ta, Ma, Yum of Egypt. Khartamayim. Karatamayim. But it says there are a number of theories. It says Ben Yehuda in the footnote to his dictionary entry. So this is the dictionary entry to that word hartumim right there. Writes that the etymology is unclear. He says that some derived from the root karat, like karax or karagma in Greek, karax in Greek or karagma in Greek, to engrave. Those that follow this theory claim it refers to their ability to write in hieroglyphic, which would make sense because if you're engraving in something, that's a karax in Greek or karagma in Greek. You're engraving in something. And if you were writing hieroglyphics, what were you doing? You were engraving the writing in stone. You were engraving those symbols in stone. He then quotes a theory that the word is related to chatam, nose, because it was the practice of the sorcerers to speak through their nose. In the end, however, he says it is likely borrowed from the Egyptian, even though no such word has been found yet. But here's the one that goes over here. See, look, right here it says and they're going to that word kartum. It says first of all, karat. That's like a Y right there. Karatayim or karatum, meaning beak, nose, trunk, as well as borrowed meanings you mentioned. So it says it's also meaning large, nose, snout, but it says beak or nose. Now I thought about it. Why would it mean nose or why would it mean beak? But Spirit had this hit me. Remember it mentioned writing, right? Remember it mentioned the word we read earlier, references to engrave, because they had the ability to write in hieroglyphics. Remember that? And it's telling you this word up here. Because when you read earlier, it says kartum and hartumim. So it's mentioned in two words. The word kartum, it says right there. It says kartum. It says it means beak or nose. Now why would that particular word mean beak or nose or trunk? And I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I think I know why it would mean beak or nose. When you read on, it says the name of the Sudanese capital, because Khartoum, right here you see it, is the name of the Sudanese capital. It says the name of the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, is certainly related as described in Place Names of the World. So this is a book called Place Names of the World. It says founded in 1821 as an Egyptian army camp, the city has an Arabic name, and if you type in Sudanese capital Khartoum, you'll actually find it. But it says it talks about where the word comes from. You see, it says mentions end of an elephant's trunk, head, things like that. So Khartoum is said to mean beak. It's also said to mean trunk. Okay. Hold on. And this word they have for Khartoum is the same word they have right here. And it says in Exodus, that's the word that's used for Egyptian magicians. And it says in modern Hebrew, it's used for the prow of a ship and head of elephant's trunk and rocket nose cone. It's also the name of a capital city. Got it real quick. Now this is Exodus 7:11. We just read that on that site, right? You got it, that word magician. It has a ha right there, but it's a cha, ratum, khatum. And it says diviner, magician, astrologer, engraver, writer, only derivative sense of one possessed of occult knowledge. Remember, they had those temples. They had the House of Life. Remember, they had these different spells where they would make the dead rise and so-called have the dead rise and put curses upon people and blessings upon people. So they had all them different spells. So that's the word that would be used for them in Hebrew. A diviner, a magician, or an astrologer, or an engraver, or a writer. Remember, they were also those the House of Life. Per Ankh was also said to be was also said to possibly be a scriptorium, but they were right. So these ancient Egyptians, their magicians, were called Khartoum. by in the scriptures, because they were engravers, they were writers. After all, Moses understood what the Egyptian was about. He lived among them for 40 years. So these magicians were engravers, they were writers. They possessed occult knowledge, they possessed the so-called knowledge of dream interpretation, casting spells, and so-called knowledge of dream interpretation, casting spells, and rising the dead, and so forth. That's why you had the word divine and magician and astrology there. I hope your brothers is keeping up. But it also says its word is also used to represent a prow of a ship, an elephant's trunk, and a rocket nose cone. Now, if you look in the Hebrew dictionary, you may find that you should be able to, you'd be more than likely be able to find that meaning there. Okay? What they call it, the Ben Yehudi dictionary. If you have one of those dictionaries, you may be able to find that definition there. But I thought about it. Why would it mean beak or nose or trunk? Why would it mean beak? That stood out to me. Why? I'll tell you why right now. Then the spirit dawned on me. The Egyptians had a god named Thoth. And who was Thoth? Thoth is the Egyptian god of writing, magic, wisdom, and the moon. He was one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt, alternately said to be self-created or born of the seed of Horus, from the forehead of Set. As the son of these two deities representing order and chaos respectively, he was also god of equilibrium. In regard, he is also associated closely with the principle of Ma'at. But that's the main point I wanted to get. I don't want to read no more about him. But it said, but look, how did Thoth look? An ibis bird. And what does he got? A beak. A long beak. So let me just read that word can mean beak. And he's the god of writing. See, did not they write? It's not that word, we looked it up in the blue letter. It says write. It says writing, engraving. Magic, wisdom. The the house of life, they had so-called wisdom. Didn't the Bible speak about Moses knew about the wisdom of the Egyptians? Magic, see? Rising the dead and so forth. And look at him, he got something in his hand and he's writing. See that? Look on this right there. See that? Something is in his hand. If you look and you see he's writing something. And he has a long beak. So I perceive that may be one of the reasons why they may have called him that. Okay? Go right to the point. This is let's start from verse 20 as a matter of fact. Acts 7 and 20. In time which Moses was born and was exceeding fair and nourished up in his father's house 3 months. And when he was cast out, and that was from Ancient History Online. I'll go back to that real quick. And when he was cast out, Pharaoh's daughter took him up and nourished him for her own son. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds. What does that word wisdom mean? Sophia in the Greek. Wisdom, broad and full of intelligence, used of the knowledge of very diverse matters. Okay? In the act of interpreting dreams and always giving the sages advice, skill in the arrangement of affairs, a bunch of different definitions. Alright? Okay, that was from worldhistory.org, Thoth. So with that, I'm going to close in this. It's already 23 minutes. And Lord will, so I'm going to have to be one more part. I thought this would be the last, but it'll be one more part. And then I'm going to close. I'm going to say, oh, praise Yahweh Shah. All the brothers learn something. Until next time, Shalom.